Sidney Crosby, I would say last night is probably the best that he has looked. There were some people, and they were in on the live yesterday at Tip of the Ice-Burgh saying, does it feel like something's off with Sidney Crosby? And I said, it's not like something's off. It's just he hasn't quite hit that level. He's been good, but he hasn't quite hit that level. He hit that level last night, and in doing so, notches his 1,600th career point on a power play assist to Brian Rust in the first period. That was his first of 3 points on the night, but that was obviously the one that was the first memorable one. Obviously scores his first goal of the season in the overtime winner, but he becomes the 5th fastest player to reach the 1,600 point mark behind only, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Marcel Dion, Jaromir Jagr. I would say a pretty good class of people to be included in for Sidney Crosby. So a tremendous milestone. He really only has one left that he could hit this season, and it's not a huge milestone as much as it is continuing to climb the all-time points ladder. He's 39 points behind Joe Sakic for 9th all-time on the NHL points list. That's probably the only person he's going to pass this year, but you know who that puts him right up against? Sir 66, Mario Lemieux. So certainly a nice night to cap off, a crazy first week of the season for Sidney Crosby. And now that the milestones are pretty much behind him, I think it's just time for him to buckle down and for the Penguins to get wins. I think that's what he's been focused on this whole time. But everybody on the outside looking in is going to focus more on wins now than anything milestone-wise for Crosby and for Malkin, who we'll get to in just a minute.
Yeah, the big stories are gone. It's now about the games. It's now focusing on who the next opponent is. It's now focusing on who's playing on what line. It's time to start looking into the minute details of this team and not just, hey, let's get Crosby, Malkin the puck. Let's get that. People didn't even get it. Let's get that moment, the shared point, the puck cut in half. I mean, we didn't get it, but so be it. The Penguins did go out. They each got their achievements. They got a big, entertaining win in an early season game that could mean something down the line, because what did early season games that were blown lead to down the line last season? That was a missed playoff appearance. So getting the single point and then getting that second one in overtime, they're trending in the proper direction already. And it is early and there's still a ton of room to get better or get worse. But so far, it looks like some of the big problems that nagged the Penguins and finding wins last year are starting to mitigate a bit. I mean, they scored a game-winning goal in overtime, and the power play looks to be rolling a bit.
I mean, 2 for 5 last night. I believe they scored 3 or 4 or 5, at least 4 power play goals in the first 5 games of the season. So you can't be upset with that unit. You can be upset with another unit, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, we do have to give praise to Evgeni Malkin. I mean, Crosby has been good, but Malkin has been excellent, right? He stays hot last night, scores that 500th career NHL goal. He becomes the 48th player in NHL history to hit that mark. Only 3 players that have hit 500 goals are not in the Hall of Fame, and that is discounting active players like Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, who's already hit it. But the 3 players that haven't, Peter Bondra, Pat Verbeek, and Patrick Marleau. So a lot of Pats and Petes that aren't getting the praise when they get the 500 career goals. But what I want to ask you, and the Penguins put out this graphic last night, you might have already seen it, so this might be a moot question. Can you name the 5 players that have the most assists on Evgeni Malkin goals?
I did look at it, and I'm going to see if I memorized the top 5, because it was
Most
Crosby.
of the time when we look at that, we look at the bottom, because that's way more fun anyway.
Oh, that's where the meat is. That's where the fun is. Matt Coronado is on that list. Think of that. I think that's who I saw. Anyway, Sidney Crosby's obviously number 1. I would assume Kris Letang is 2. I think Correct. I'm pretty sure I saw Phil Kessel is up there.
That's the top 3 right there.
That's 3. Okay. Oh, I forget if James Neal was the 5.
Yep.
Okay.
James Neal was the 5. So you're missing number 4. I mean, you got these pretty quickly. So number 4, don't overthink it. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I'm not going to overthink it too hard.
Really? Because it seems like you are.
I am, because now it's all coming up blanks. I know Chris Kunitz was behind James Neal.
Yes.
I remember that one. Eesh.
Brian Rust is also right behind James Neal as well.
Dang, okay.
Yeah. James Neal, I believe, had 38. Brian Rust has 32 to this point.
Screw it. Give me the last name because I don't want to hold up this podcast.
Alrighty. Well, Sergei Gonchar is number 4. His protege, I mean, not his protege, his mentor when he came to Pittsburgh. Gonchar was obviously a huge part of those early Penguins teams, those early Crosby Malkin Penguins teams, especially on the power play, where Evgeni Malkin made a lot of his hay in those MVP Art Ross seasons. So Sidney Crosby, Kris Letang, Phil Kessel, Sergei Gonchar, James Neal, and then number 6 is Brian Rust, floating up there pretty well. But Malkin, you look at what he's done now. He's hit 3 milestones in the first week of the season, similar to what we talked about with Crosby. Okay, now move on and continue to perform the way you've performed. 500 goals for Malkin, 1,300 points, and 800 assists all hit within the first week of the season. He also, just a feather in the cap, leads the league in scoring with 11 points in 5 games, the best start to a season he has had in his career. Perfect to wait till year 19 to go out and do that. But 2 goals, 9 assists in 5 games. If you look at his stat line, the last 4, 2 assists, a goal and 2 assists, and then a goal and 3 assists for a 4-point night last night. Evgeni Malkin has been on fire this season.
It's been an incredible start to the year. He's leading the league in points right now. It's only been those 2 goals, but I mean, they were 2 important goals for himself to get, and for what it's worth. His playmaking ability is clearly there as well. It's all coming together. It's all, no one expected to start from like this from him, right?
I don't think anybody could have predicted 11 points in 5 games. And if you did, you're lying.
Yeah. Especially when you look at some of the superstars in the league right now that are off to slow starts. I mean, I don't think McDavid has scored a goal yet. Draisaitl just recently got his second. Austin Matthews, I don't think, has a point yet. I could be wrong about that one now. But some of the biggest names in the league have struggled out of the gate, and yet there's part of the old guard in Evgeni Malkin doing this, putting up 11 points in the first 5 games, over 2 points a game, and there's your math. There's your math for you, but no one would have expected this coming from him, especially after, he's been healthy the last 2 years, but the way injuries have piled up in recent memory, the way the point to production has kind of slipped a bit, especially in certain areas. But this is the first time he's had a hot start in a long time, and it's impressive to see.
It was funny you mentioned part of that old guard. I was thinking, well, he probably is the old guard. I was wondering how many older players there are than him in the NHL right now. And there is 5. He is the 6th oldest player in the NHL right now. First, and the oldest, is Marc-Andre Fleury. And then it's Ryan Suter, Brent Burns, Corey Perry, and Alex Ovechkin. It's kind of crazy that Brent Burns is older than Corey Perry in my eyes. But again, that's a conversation for either off the podcast or an entirely different, like, after hours podcast where we have more time to kill.